Welcome back to the Meat Dudes. I'm Evan.
I'm Tyler.
Awesome. And today, we are joined by Andrew Shirley from River Valley Wagyu, and it's right outside Chehalis, Washington. And he's doing something kind of rare, man. He's doing grass-fed Wagyu, only grass-fed, raised regeneratively right here in the Northwest, man. How you doing, Andrew?
Doing well, guys. Doing well. Appreciate the time and the opportunity to come and share what we got going on out here.
Yeah, man. And we had a previous conversation when you stopped by the restaurant, dropped off some beef, and we were really impressed with you and your beef, and we knew we wanted to have you on the podcast, man. So we're excited to talk about grass fed, talk about Wagyu fat, all the how the fat is different, and man, get this thing going, dude. I think it's gonna be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
So here we go. So I'm gonna tease a couple questions, and we're gonna get into all this. So when people think of grass fed, they want to know: can grass fed Wagyu be ultra marbled? Is it healthier? And how does it stack up flavor wise, man? So we're gonna get into all of that stuff. But first, real quickly, man, how'd you start River Valley Wagyu, and how'd you get into that cattle business?
Yeah, so a couple years ago, luckily had the opportunity to sell my former business and get to move to Washington State. We were living in Arizona, and we were looking for water, trees, and grass again because my wife does flowers and she's got a flower farm. And so when we started looking around the country, looking at what made sense, and ended up finding a place up here. Actually, just sold everything, moved up. First started out in Oregon, couldn't find anything. Finally found something up here and called this place home. And once we did that, I knew then from my previous experience with Wagyu beef on a consumer side that I really wanted to produce that same product. And then when I started to research the possibilities I could do with it, not only just for taste and consumption, the nutritional and other benefits, that's when I really kind of delved into it and went in the way I did.
That's cool, man. I love it. I love it. And we're gonna get into that. So why grass fed specifically? So you're Wagyu and you're grass fed. So when I think of grass fed, I think of very meat heavy, nutrient dense, not a lot of fat, sometimes no fat. And then when I think Wagyu, I'm thinking beautiful intermuscular marbling. So is this kind of the trick, man? Putting both of those together? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, so that's kind of the idea I had, was like, let's see if we can take this breed that's so genetically predisposed for intermuscular fat and marbling, and let's see if I do a completely grass forage based diet, would that still yield a palatable result? And it took a couple years to get to a final product, and then we finally had our first round this last December. And we're pretty happy with the results. We saw a really good baseline, and I think it kind of shows overall what the actual potential that is within this breed, specifically because of that genetic predisposition.
Yeah, definitely, man. Cows eat grass, so when we say grass fed, you're talking about grass finished because most of the nice cattle, like we work with a lot of farms and they're 85% pasture raised, and then they're finished on some sort of local grain. And that gives, especially the Wagyu and in all cattle, right? It gives it that extra push, that extra fat, that extra intermuscular fat to really bulk it up. So you're talking about they eat is grass. There's no finish, right? So are they just out on pasture? And how does that stack up, man? Like what kind of marbling are you getting for those Wagyu cows?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, I don't think, and it's a goal to hopefully maybe be comparable to something like that. I don't know if that goal is actually really possible, but I think the baseline results show that we can get incrementally close and actually significantly close in some respects to that stuff. I mean, I don't think we'll ever be as marbled as that, but that's okay because we're a different product, for a different day of the week. It's not nothing against anything. We love both. I eat both. It's just a matter of maybe today I'll have this and tomorrow I'll have that. So And I think a lot of it has to do with what we're doing is like the feeding the grass is, obviously everybody has that during the summer months, but during the winter months, is making sure that we get them the best hay possible and keeping it year round. And so, I don't know everything. I don't know much of anything, truthfully, about about this business and animals. I only know what I've learned and what I've read. Uh, but what I've seen from my experience is that giving them roughage and hay all year round somehow happens to allow that fat to develop along with their foraging, and also allow that fat to kind of color up in a nice palatable way.
Yeah, that's
You
what
get
Chef Tyler and I just noticed.
fat from the grass fed?
Say that again.
Do you get that nice kind of creamy yellow fat from all the grass fed, or do you see that nice white striation in between the intermuscular fat?
That's what was really kind of one of my first thoughts is going into it, like what color would it be? And I was actually super surprised to see that for the most part, it came out really white, which was really surprising to me because I didn't anticipate that from my
Sure.
own past consumption and research. Like, I really didn't think that was possible. And I think, some of the studies and things I've read have kind of linked back to the fact that when they're eating grass, that all that grass is green, right? And it has chlorophyll. And so if you just continue to mix in that hay and roughage throughout their feed the whole lifetime, all year round, you kind of dilute that amount of chlorophyll that goes into the fat that makes it yellow. And so that's kind of what I've been trying to do is, see, they don't eat it as much in the summer, but they will eat it. And so it's like, trying to mix that in and see if that comes with the result. And in the first round, that's what we saw.
Nice, dude. So, like, people like Wagyu beef because of the marbling, right? That's what it's well known for, right? Oh, I want a super marbled steak. I'm gonna go get some Wagyu. So, with grass, why did you choose to do grass here and maybe not be able to hit that high marbling? Like, what's the demographic? What's the pros to that?
Yeah, so like I said, it's just a difference of what to have for today versus tomorrow, and it was more based on trying to achieve that nutritional density and benefit that grass fed has always had, right? And then make that super palatable, and so getting into that, we start to look at what is the potential for this fat? Can we make this fat more nutrient beneficial than harmful? Because that's what a lot of beef over time has had, the bad stigma of is, too much fat is bad for your heart and all these different elements and things. And, the studies that have come out in the recent, I'd say last 20 years or so, have shown that, actually we can pack this fat with a lot of nutrient density. We can make it have high concentrations of omega 3s and omega 6s. So, even to the point where, we might be able to surpass that of salmon. So it's like, you know, let's see if we can't achieve some similar goal. So we're looking for someone who wants to enjoy that palatability and fat of a Wagyu, but at the same time, maybe they're wanting today to have a little more nutritional density in that meat
Yeah,
versus something else.
yeah. Man, I mean, I'll say, when I ate that grass-fed ribeye that you gave me, I was like, wow, man, like this is great. Like I my first thought was, okay, it's not quite as marbled as some of the stuff that I'm eating, but I know it's going to be different. I know it's all grass-fed, and it tasted amazing. So I was blown away at first. I was like, wow, this, you're not bullshit, man. Like it tastes like Wagyu beef. Doesn't, we just had a really nice ultra marbled steak from Vermont Wagyu that she sent us up here. This ribeye, and that was super marbled. It was delicious. It was amazing. And yours is different than that, right? That so you're gonna get. Hers almost looked like A5, but this is different. It's for a different consumer, and like you said, like maybe it's for a different day of the week. And that's the first thing that I thought when I ate it. I was like, dude, I'd eat this at least once a week. Like this is really, really good. And I don't know, it felt different, maybe it was in my head. When I put it on the grill, I smelled something different. I was like, ooh, I can smell the grass. Like, maybe it was in my head, but it was a really interesting to eat. And when I ate that rib cap, brother, like, I was like, you know what, that ain't no bullshit, that tastes just like Wagyu beef, like some good Wagyu beef. So
Also, I'm the ribeye guy, so I'm gonna need another one because Evan snatched
Done
that
and
up and took
done,
it home
gentlemen.
before I could chase him out to his car.
yeah, dude. Oh man, I had to, man. I had to. Oh no, but just saying, like, it was good, and maybe it was for, like I said, a different day of the week and a different demographic. And you talk about these studies coming out. Where are these studies? You sent us a bunch of studies, so where are they coming out of? I know they're all peer reviewed and everything like that, but where is the bulk of that stuff coming out of?
Yeah, so a lot of it's coming out of Korea. Some is coming out of Australia as
Mm-hmm.
well. And then obviously in the United States, Dr. Smith, I believe it is, who's currently at Texas A&M, um, he's done a lot of studies, and I think he's actually probably the foremost leading researcher on beef fat in the United States. And what kind of caught my eye was and I don't know if I got this one over to you, was an article recapping his speech to the American Wagyu Association back in 2016. And he was speaking about the same
Mm-hmm.
things about the potentials of this fat and like what, could potentially be utilized, the real opportunities there. And so, coming across that and then starting to come and read these studies from like the Korean, universities talking about the different fatty acid profiles and how we can, and they're testing with Hanwoo beef and American and Australian crossbred cattle and Wagyu. It really opened my eyes to like the real potential.
Yeah. Yeah, so we understand that there's a lot of studies on Wagyu beef and how that fat is healthier. It's got more, omegas than sometimes even salmon. You'll read that sometimes the olive oil, but this we're talking about grass fed Wagyu beef. So what put both of those together, and does that make it even more healthier? Get into that a little bit.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just like the different types of fatty acids, right? So like there's in the monosaturated fatty acids, you have your oleic and solic fatty acids. I'm probably saying both of those wrong, and your saturated fatty acids. And so from what I've understood, the concentration and ratio of those when you're doing grass fed is significantly higher. In many cases, your concentration of beneficial fatty acids is 5 times higher in grass fed versus other methods. So, yeah, so it's really phenomenal to see, like, what kind of difference you can see in the actual overall makeup of the fatty acid chains that are in that fat.
Yeah, dude. I mean, woo, it could be crazy, man. Could be a new thing, dude. Like if you I guess the demographic that would need something like that. Explain the demographic a little bit. Who are you targeting? Because like I said, a lot of Wagyu beef consumers are like, give me the highest marbled, crazy stuff. But there's a lot of people out there that just want to eat really nutrient dense things as well. Not saying that other Wagyu doesn't have that, but what type of demographic are you really targeting with your beef?
Yeah, so I mean, we're looking for someone who, is really taking a lot of time and care into understanding exactly, what they're consuming and trying to use that as a decision, for what they're buying, right? And so, you know, ultimately, I grew this in the way that I would eat it for myself and my family. I wouldn't put anything on a plate that, and I don't think any rancher would, that they didn't think would be good for them or others. And so, I think, our thought was, let's put something out there that I know I can comfortably eat every day of the week, as well as, others could as well. And so, yeah, I think the demographics, just anyone who's looking to eat, you know, some nutrient dense beef on a given daily or bi-daily basis.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's definitely a new trend right now in beef. Period. It kind of reminds me of almost like when the organic label came out in
Yeah.
vegetables years and years and years ago, and some people were just sworn on like, oh, I'm only going to eat organic vegetables, and I see that in grass-fed beef right now. Honestly, there's so many people that there's not a ton of our clients that come in to buy beef and ask specifically for grass-fed, but there is a percentage that do, and I think that the commonwealth of people kind of really paying attention to what they're putting on their plate is really starting to pay attention to that label. And I think that the what you're doing and the whole grass movement, I think, is nutritionally. I don't know if I want to say it's better. I don't want to say if it's. I don't know. I mean, it's definitely a trend right now, and people are getting very interested about really, really knowing where their meat comes from and what how it's grown and all that stuff. And that's really what we try to do
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the education of the meat dudes and our meat counter and all that stuff is more or less like education, so people can really understand what we're talking about and how you guys and all these other ranchers are humanely growing these most beautiful animals that they have.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I
dude,
think it
for sure. And
goes
and
to
then,
yes, it goes back to like going to that consumer is like also, someone who is environmentally conscious as well. And I think that's another
For
element
sure,
that's
for
really
sure.
unique with our beef is the fact that, we put such an emphasis on regenerative ranching, with amp grazing and hopefully starting to work in new species so that way we can be, fully regenerative, if you will. And with
Mm-hmm.
amp grazing we're able to really start to bring environmental benefits to ranching, which many people have seen as a negative over time.
yes, what is grazing?
Yeah, so it's adaptive multi-paddock grazing.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what that is we're taking what herds would naturally do, bison herds, cattle herds, if they were wild animals originally, not here because they were domesticated, but bison would do. And they would come through a field or a pasture, they would graze through it, they would leave, go to the next, and then eventually return back and come back through it. And in that
Mm-hmm.
process, they wouldn't eat every blade of grass that was in that field. They would only eat a portion of it, right? But they would leave, their fecal matter and urine and things. And that all that creates life and microbes for the soil, right? As they stomp it into the ground and as it starts to break down and as, grass is there and it breaks down. So with amp grazing, we're basically mimicking that same natural uh, cycle, uh, but in smaller form. So basically, I'm able to utilize more land, have a higher stocking density, and capture a lot of carbon into the soil at the same time as growing the life in my soil. So basically, every day we'll move the cattle, or every couple of days, an acre every two or every day or every couple of days each day. And by doing so, it takes 8 days for grass to grow back. So by the time we get back to the eighth acre, that grass has already regenerated itself. And so we're able to go and regraze that same part, which, is really phenomenal. I mean, from a business case perspective, it adds a ton of value as well as environmentally.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge thing right now is regenerative farming, and not like it's not a trend, but we're starting to see it a little bit more, and it's hard to do, right? Like you gotta do things differently. You gotta have different equipment, different mindset. And you talk about you want to have a bunch of different animals on the farm, right? Do you currently have only cattle, or what do you have right now?
So we have cattle and chickens right
Hmm.
now, and
Okay.
then the goal would be to incorporate sheep or other species, pigs as well. So that way, we can do the full cycle of animals where it's like, sheep, cattle, then chicken, and then kind of rerun that again, because each one drops something beneficial and nutrient dense to the land, as well as their jobs are different, because the sheep won't graze as hard as the cattle will graze hard, the chickens won't, but the chickens will scratch the manure as well as leave their own manure on the field. So everybody has a job in this cycle, right? And microbes in the soil are one of the key elements. And so it's like, how do we grow those microbes in the soil? So, I like to joke, I'm not really a rancher, and I'm just a grass farmer who has cows. So
Right.
that's my goal, at least.
Yeah, man. No, you sent me all that stuff about the Carbon Cowboys. I've been listening to a lot of those stories, and it really is interesting about how that whole regenerative farming is basically the best thing that you can do for the land, for the earth, for climate change. And it's got some really great arguments on how having all those animals together, just creating the actual nature cycle on your farm, can do great things, like I said, for the earth, and also give you amazing nutrient dense food. I commend you for doing that, man. I think it's a great thing. I think we could do a whole series of podcasts on regenerative farming, man. But I really, really want to stick on this, grass fed and Wagyu, because it still is, to me, man. It's like such a trip to see your beef, how it was so pretty nicely marbled, and super nutrient dense, and just tasted amazing, and it was only grass. So like, you know, you said through the winter time, obviously you're in Washington, so they can't say on grass. I did want to ask you, since we're on grass fed, I forgot, I wanted to bring this up. We see that all over. When Tyler was talking about trends, we see that all over the place. What are some bad grass fed, I mean, not practices, but what are some cheater ways to do things? Because I feel like we see grass fed all the time, and it's like, are they really? How does that work? What does it take to be grass fed? And then this goes back to knowing your source, right? We know that we can see your farm right now. We know they're actually eating grass, but how do people get away with saying grass fed when it's not? When we're talking about those meat labels,
we know there's some technicalities with that, because we've been told by other people that if you grow corn,
Yep,
and feed your cattle corn that's still on the husk, that's technically still a grass.
correct.
Right?
Yeah, yep. So that there's things like that, and then there's also other. I think you can. I mean, if people put out different additives and things, like pouring out, you know, molasses or whatever. I mean, I guess that could be some other ways of doing it. Um, but I think the one you spoke about is the one I've heard the most. Is like, when someone told me that one day, I was like, how does that work? Like, how are we able to call that grass fed and yet we're still feeding grain? I don't really understand that. So yeah, I mean, through the winter, I mean, my thing is, and it cost me a little more, but to be honest, and that's what the other element of this whole grass fed thing is like, as a rancher, for the business case is almost equally or more compelling than the other cases. And so, like, through the winter, I do spend good money, but I spend good money on the best hay I could find. So, best orchard grass, best alfalfa, a little mix of both. And that way we can, make sure that they have the best, most nutrient dense grass all year around. But yeah, I don't know, since I don't do that, it's kind of hard to think of the different ways, and I haven't been in
yeah,
this business too long.
yeah.
So, yeah, I know that's a big one, but I don't know too many other ways people kind of work their circle.
Okay. No worries, man. So we know the most, know, cattle get slaughtered, in the commercial realm here, get slaughtered what, 14 to 18 months.
Yeah.
A lot of Wagyu's around 30 months, but where does yours kind of fall? Because you're not like finishing, you're just basically I mean, that's how you do it, right? They're on pasture for X number of days, and that's it. So where do your kind of fall? Where do you harvest?
Yeah, so and that, I guess that's the other way people can kind of get around it is they start on grass and don't finish.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, I mean, our first one, we took one that was probably right under, or was right under 30 months. Then we took another that was over 30 months. And as you guys know or may know, is like once you get over 30 months, you can't use the bones and the spine bones anymore, rib bones. So, that kind of creates a challenge there in a way of offerings. So, my goal would be around the 28-month mark. That's where I really want to be. I think realistically, from what I've seen others do, it may be 30-month plus. It's still a learning process for me.
Yeah. Hey, Tyler, does that mean you can't use the hanger steak off of
Uh,
the 30 months?
no, hanger is off of that table, but it's the porterhouse, oxtail, uh,
Tongue?
tongue. There's definitely probably some neck pieces too.
What about cheeks?
I don't think
I
cheeks
don't
are
think,
off the
yeah,
table.
it was mostly like bone stuff or nervous tissue stuff that can
Next
like
to the
harbor some
next to the spinal
organism.
cord,
Yeah,
central nervous system attachment.
Because of mad cow disease, right? So 30
yes,
plus months. Yeah. So
yeah.
that is a crazy thing for Wagyu ranchers that have to kind of deal with that and cut their beef differently, offer different things like you said. But you can get up to, if you do it at 28 months, you feel like you can get up to the marbling that you like.
Yeah, I think so. I think cows are no different than us in a way that, like, if they lay around and eat a bunch of food, they'll gain fat. It's not,
They get
you know,
chubby.
exactly. So, and that's, the other cool part about this amp grazing is like they don't have to walk far for water. They don't have to walk far for food because they're right there on it. And also they don't get to go far, right? And so like, they don't spend a lot of energy building muscles to walk here, there, everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that's how we're going to really be able to achieve, those kind of results is with this method because they're not turning all that fat into actual muscle mass.
Yeah. Yeah.
Andrew, let me ask you a funny question. What's the demeanor of your cattle? Are
Mm.
they gentle, docile, beautiful beings?
Yeah, they are definitely all of that and above.
I
They're
love it.
just hanging out, doing their thing, eating, grazing, walking, doing the deal. But yeah, I'm out here with them right now, so they're pretty
Right.
calm.
That's kind of the resonating tone and question I like to ask Wagyu ranchers because some of them are like they're like pets,
Yeah.
It's so nice and follow you around and whatever. So it's just interesting to me,
I know.
growing up in Montana and like being around Angus branches and whatever. Some of those some of those buggers are nasty.
Hmm.
It will like charge you in the pen when you're throwing hay in there and stuff. And from what I've heard, the Wagyu breed is just such a nice animal.
And
Hmm.
that was another benefit and why I chose this species is the feasibility and easeability of ranching this species or breed
Hmm.
rather is, they are docile, they're very calm. I mean, don't get me wrong, they'll get riled up for food any day of the week, but even then they still calm down. So, it's and also like the calving process with these from what I've heard, I haven't experienced that yet. That we're hoping to go through that process here soon. Is that they're much easier at calving, so it's not
Hmm.
such they don't have trouble, and so yeah, they do have smaller calves, but at the same benefit, you don't have loss of the mother or loss of the calf at such a high rate, which is
Hmm.
phenomenal.
And you are raising, I don't think we talked about this, but you are raising full blood Wagyu cattle.
Yep, absolutely,
Full blood.
full blood.
Absolutely.
Yep, high
Where,
top.
where, where'd you get your genetics from?
Yeah, so I got it from a local gentleman, and he has a herd of like 200, and he got his from different places, from Bar R, I think Lone Mountain, and some other folks where he's gotten bulls and heifers from, and he's been doing it for 10 plus years. And I happened to get introduced to him from another gentleman who does full blood Wagyu here in the Olympia area. And so when I met with him, he said, "Hey, this is the guy you need to go talk to." And
Yeah.
so sat down with him. He showed me, the registrations, the bloodlines, and things. And it was like, oh wow, there's a lot more to this than this is a Wagyu cow and that's a Wagyu cow. It's like
Totally.
this Wagyu cow has Shigatani, it has Suzatani, like it has all these different crosses of genetics and names and lines that you got to learn to really understand this breed.
Yeah.
Sugar
That's
time.
you got Tyler riled up with that. That's his favorite cow.
My God.
Seems to be everyone's favorite.
Love that
There's
A big boy. Oh man, so Tyler and I are going to go down. We're going to the American Wagyu Association conference in September. We're going to be judging the best Wagyu steak in America. They've got people that are submitting all their Wagyu steaks. So to me, I think it's a really cool thing. It's all about flavor and and texture, and they're all going to be cooked the same. But when we're talking about this, yours is going to be a little bit different. So do you think there should be maybe a grass-fed category down the road? Do you see that? Because I foresee this being a really big thing. The most marble. I mean, we just got something I said from Vermont Wagyu, like that was fucking insane. But like yours should be in a different category because is there a way to test? I guess what I'm asking is there a way to test for each steak and the nutrients and how healthy the fat is? How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so I think what they do is they take samples like a couple hundred grams or a couple grams, and then they probably run it through my guess a mass spectrometer or something to really kind of break out the different minerals and carbon chains between the omega 3s and omega 6s, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so should there be a new category? Maybe, yeah, I think so. But I also wonder, like, I don't know. I mean, I'm early into this process, and I'm super uh, optimistic person, and
Mm-hmm.
so seeing the baseline I saw made me think because I know I could do much better than what I did. Um, Makes me think I can get into the mix, not in the top of the mix, more
Yeah.
towards maybe the lower middle of the pack. So maybe a dual registration per se in like its own category and at the same time competing in the overall, knowing that you're not gonna get to the top, but just seeing where you fall.
Yeah. And that would be interesting to see. We talked about on our last podcast the different levels of prime that are coming out. It
Yeah.
would be interesting to see kind of where yours fell on that level because I mean the one that I saw is definitely in the category of prime. The one that we cooked up was definitely. So is it in the lower levels, the medium, the high levels? I mean, it would be cool to kind of see where that ranged at. I would be really interested in that because of maybe all the other benefits that it has too. So, yeah, I don't know. There should be maybe a grass fed category here
No, I
because
think that would be cool. Yeah, and
yeah,
I think that also would also open up like the opportunity in the market segment for people to explore this method more because they don't feel the pressure because I mean that's the other element to this, right? As a Wagyu rancher, the word Wagyu has so many preconceived notions, right? Like ultra fatty, ultra this, ultra that, right? Yeah, so like it puts a lot of pressure on ranchers to make sure that they hit those marks, right? And so having a
True.
separate category where you can be elite in a different side of the market, might also provide a real opportunity to grow this segment and really create another opportunity for ranchers.
True.
dude, absolutely, man, absolutely, because it is made differently for maybe a little bit of a different demographic, like we said. So yeah, man, I'm down for that, and that is a good point that you brought up about the pressure of like creating the most insane. And what's funny though is that I don't think that everyone's really looking for the most insane beef all the time. They want They want healthy beef. They want to know where it's come from. Some people want grass. Some people don't care. And when we have a crazy piece of marbled beef, some people say, hey, you know what, that's too much for me. Let me go a grade lower, and
Exactly
let me
right.
find this F1 cross or this lower prime, or however you want to talk about it these days. But there's definitely room in the market for what you're doing. I think there's a lot of people that are interested in the health benefits of grass fed, solely grass fed, that maybe like I said, don't need it to be that A5 quality, and want something that tastes good, makes them feel good, and maybe has some better health benefits to it. Once we kind of lock that down, I still think that we need to do so much more research to it, and that's why if we had a different category, maybe there would be opening up a lot more research on that, because that to me is would be really really cool to find out how many more nutrients are in solely grass fed, and what it takes to do that. But like I said, most of our beef that we get is about 80% grass fed, and then finished on some sort of local grain to give it that extra. Um, but
And that would
yeah.
be interesting to see too, is like, what is, well, in a lot of the studies they do similar, they did do that, where they started out on a heavy forage diet and then, kind of worked in the grain over time. But, it would be interesting to see, like, if someone does do 80% forage and then does just finish, the last 20%, because I don't know if the studies were that ratioed. I think it was probably more balanced throughout the life of the animal.
Mhm.
And so, if that impact, if we can still capture those benefits, right, at that same process, and I'm sure we can to a degree. And the question becomes, what's the delta, right?
Yeah. No, exactly. And when we talk about finishing cows, I don't know if for sure, and I'd love to talk to a super expert on this, but it seems like the Wagyu cattle aren't finished the same way maybe Angus are. When I think of finishing Angus cattle, and just the commercial cattle, I think of them just like on a dirt, on dirt, just being, force fed everything. When we talk to all of our people, even, Plum Creek Wagyu out in Nebraska finishes on corn, and he's like, yeah, I put it out there, and they go out there, and then they'll eat, and then they'll come back, and then they're not like force fed. And when we talk about our beef, at Pure Country Farms, it's open feed pen, local barley, really good stuff. And so I feel like Wagyu is finished differently than commercial at the end of the day, and that's why it's not as stressed and has that high cortisol and everything like that. So I don't
I
know. I
think
wanted.
that's an excellent point, actually, and what I hadn't really thought too much about is like, if you Wagyu being finished in that manner or any manner like that, like, it's local ranchers and local farmers that are doing that, and Wagyu, because it's such a specialty breed and it's so intensive, that you can't really do huge herds of it and be super successful. I don't think so. I think that lends a benefit to like what you're saying, in the sense that you're getting a better finishing quality product that way as well.
Yeah, yeah. It's different, man. It's a whole different
I love both.
animal.
Can't, yeah. I mean, I'll eat both on the same day. It doesn't bother me. It's great stuff.
Yeah, man. I mean, like, we have it from all over. Like I said, we got Adam from Plum Creeks sent us over some corn finished, amazing, amazing Wagyu we had about 6 months ago. We just got some from Vermont Wagyu, which is
Yeah,
pasture raised and finished, on grain that she grows. Outstanding. And like yours, I was like, damn, dude, this is really good too, So I think it all comes down to that. There's such a passion in Wagyu, and it's still small, and that's what we really like about it. It's still small, and the American Wagyu Association is really trying to put the protections on it to give more transparency to the consumer, which is a huge thing, because your grass fed, Andrew, versus some of the grass fed that is at the store, in quotations, is going to be a lot different. Some of it could be good, but at the end of the day, I don't know. I don't know what type of grass is it finished on corn stalks. Is it just, is it actually on pasture? Who knows? And so the transparency is the one thing that we're really trying to push. American Wagyu Association is really pushing that, so you can actually, they're going to have their authentic Wagyu label out there that says, "Hey, this is from, this is from River Valley Wagyu. It's grass fed. It's this level prime." But that's just a big thing right now that we need to push. And with Wagyu, like I said, it's all passionate farmers, ranchers that are really out there, doing the work to like get this to the level that it needs to be. And hopefully when it gets to that level and the consumers really jump on it, it doesn't get overtaken by big ag, big
Yeah.
money, because
Right.
that's that's the fear.
Because it is special and it needs to continue to be special.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
think that's the unique element to this whole thing is like because it's so limited in its pool of genetic availability in a way that kind of lends itself to being more unique in its ability to be controlled, I guess, because there's no like there's thousands of just this type of genetic, right? Like there's so many different types of cross genetics that like in order you're not going to get that same level of consistency that commercial beef needs, I guess is my point in
Yeah.
that realm. So like,
Yeah.
and I think that's the cool part about this and the ranchers who raise these is they're always trying to develop new crosses and new genetic makeups that make it unique. And
Mhm.
as long as that continues to happen, I think this segment of the beef market has a real chance of maintaining its hold.
Yeah, man. It's kind of like wine, like that's what I'm hoping it kind of gets to that point where they have such strict regulations in wine. And it's a little bit different, that this from this valley in 2019 versus 2017 is going to be a little bit different. And everybody kind of understands that, man. Yeah, that's okay. We want that. We want that to be a little bit different because the nature, the terroir was different, and like if it's a warm summer here, man, maybe your beef is going to taste a little bit different, after that hot summer, So, I don't know. I feel like I want those regulations, but there could still be just really great people doing really great things under those regulations to keep it small, so we don't just have a bunch of shit Wagyu out there. That's, man, like I keep saying, that's my fear.
Yeah,
In this,
no,
in
I
this,
I think those labels will be super helpful and those registrations. And it's just my big question to them is how do we make it economically feasible and viable for the rancher? Because there's so many costs in this species alone. Like, how do we make it so it's sustainable to register hundreds of animals, right? And so I think they're still working through all that, and I think they'll come up with a great system and a process. They've already kind of started that, and so I look forward to enrolling and being a part of it and seeing what
cool.
it could do for my brand too.
Yeah, man. I love it, dude. Well, Andrew, man, where can everybody find you at, man? Where can they look you up?
Yeah, so as of recently, if you want to come buy some beef, you can come find me at the Olympia Farmers Market every Saturday. I'll be there somewhere in that market, so I'm there. Otherwise, come check us out on River Valley Wagyu on Instagram, Facebook, and our website. We hope to start doing some shipping here in the future. That obviously creates some unique challenges, but and then, hopefully we'll be working with some other folks to get it out in a broader means. So that way you can have it at a restaurant
Yeah.
close to you. If you're in the Chehalis area, you can order it at Jeremy's Farm to Table, pre-order some beef there too. So
Cool.
that's where I'm at, and that's where you can find me. And also here on the ranch. So
Dude, that's awesome, man. I appreciate it, man. Hey, before we get out of here, man, what's your favorite cut to eat? How do you
Oh,
how do you cook it?
I mean, man, I'd be lying if I didn't say my favorite wasn't the ribeye, and I mean, it's hard to not go there. Zebuton's good, but it's just like I'd go ribeye, cast iron, you know, max 4 minutes on each side, three really,
Dude,
and we're done.
I love it, man. Well, yeah, man, that ribeye you dropped off here, dude. I'd be eating that too, man. That thing, I'd be eating that every week.
Awesome.
I'd be eating it too, Andrew.
Yeah.
Fair enough. You need to be eating it. We'll make it happen for
Yeah,
sure.
No, I'm coming out. I got to come
Nice.
down and visit my buddy Eric, and
yeah, dude.
I'll bring him over. He lives in a he has 3 daughters and a wife, and they're all vegetarian.
Oh wow,
So
yeah.
when we get together, we sneak off and we eat.
Fair enough. Fair enough. My wife's
I'll bring him out to the
vegetarian.
ring.
Oh man, I love it, dude. Well, Andrew, this has been awesome, man. We really appreciate you, dude. Like I said, you have great beef, and you're doing some cool stuff out there. Keep it up. Keep us in the loop, man. And I hope that yeah, we can cross paths here soon.
Yeah, thanks, gentlemen. I really appreciate the time and consideration and the opportunity to share what grass-fed Wagyu can do, and maybe see how the development goes.
Yeah, dude. If it, the more studies that come out, man, we got to have you on again after more and more stuff comes out. Just keep talking about it because it seems like a pretty cool direction.
Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen.
All right, Andy.
Man, have a good one.
You
Enjoy
too.
the sun.
Yeah, exactly.